When 31-year-old Evelyn Hartwell stepped off the train in Copper Ridge, Montana, she carried two things: a worn carpet bag that held everything she owned, and a letter she couldn't bring herself to open. This was her 7th attempt. 7 platforms, 7 towns, 7 chances to be chosen by a man who might offer her something more than invisibility. The first 6 had taught her a bitter truth. The world had no use for women like her. Too old, too plain, too poor, too used up by years of teaching other people's children while having none of her own. But what Evelyn didn't know, as she stood among 6 younger, prettier women that September afternoon, was that the wealthiest rancher in 3 territories was about to walk past every single one of them to choose her. Not because he pitied her, not because she was his last option, but because he needed someone who understood failure, someone who knew how to stand back up after being knocked down. Because Nathaniel Calloway had a secret, an 8-year-old son who hadn't spoken a single word in 2 years, and he believed that only a woman who'd survived her own breaking could teach his boy how to be whole again. This is the story of how rejection became redemption, how silence found its voice, and how 2 broken people built something stronger than the fairy tale romance everyone else was chasing. If this story touches your heart, please stay until the end. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment with where you're watching from. Your support means everything. Now, let's begin where hope was nearly lost. The September wind carried dust and broken promises across the platform of Copper Ridge Station. Evelyn Hartwell stood with her carpet bag at her feet, her gloved hands folded carefully over the faded fabric of her traveling dress. The same dress she'd worn to 5 previous introductions, carefully mended each time, the seams now holding more hope than thread. Around her, the afternoon sun beat down without mercy, turning the wooden planks beneath her boots into something that felt like judgment itself. She was surrounded by flowers. That's what they looked like. Anyway, 6 other women who had arrived on the same train, each of them fresh and bright in ribbon bonnets and spring-colored dresses that hadn't seen a single alteration. Their ages ranged from 19 to perhaps 24. Their faces unmarked by the particular exhaustion that comes from teaching other people's children while having none of your own. From watching years pass in rented rooms where the wallpaper never changes and the future never arrives, Evelyn recognized the look in their eyes. She'd worn it herself once, 6 years ago, when she'd been 25 and still believed that desperation could be mistaken for hope if you dressed it up properly. Ladies, Reverend Thomas stood before them, his wife Martha beside him, both wearing the kind of patient smiles that came from hosting these introductions 4 times a year. Welcome to Copper Ridge. We're grateful you've made the journey, and we trust that the Lord has plans for each of you here in our growing community. Evelyn's fingers tightened around her bag handle. The Lord's plans had been notably absent from her previous attempts. 6 platforms, 6 sets of patient smiles, 6 experiences of being the woman no one approached while the music played and the lemonade grew warm. Now we have 7 fine gentlemen joining us this afternoon, Martha continued, her voice carrying that particular brightness women used when trying to make something difficult sound easy. Each of them has been vetted by our community leaders. Each is a man of good standing with a home and means to provide. The younger women whispered to each other, adjusting ribbons and checking their reflections in the station window. Evelyn stood still. She'd learned that movement only drew attention to what you were trying to hide. The threadbare cuffs, the waist that had thickened slightly with age and irregular meals, the way her dark hair had already begun to show silver at the temples, despite her attempts to tuck those strands away. The sound of horses and wagon wheels announced the arrival of the men. Evelyn didn't look up immediately. She'd learned that too. Let them see the younger women first. Let them make their choices among the flowers before their eyes even reached the wilted stem at the end. Gentlemen, welcome. Reverend Thomas's voice boomed with rehearsed enthusiasm. Let me present our guests. The introductions began. Sarah Henderson from Ohio, 19, daughter of a banker. Emily Watson from Pennsylvania, 22, accomplished at piano. Catherine Morris, 20, known for her needlework. Margaret Brown, 23, speaks French. Each name that wasn't hers felt like another door closing. And this is Miss Evelyn Hartwell from Boston, formerly a schoolteacher. Formerly, The word hung in the air like an admission of failure. Evelyn finally raised her eyes. 7 men stood before them, ranging in age from perhaps 25 to 50. She'd learned to read them quickly. The young ones always looked past her to the prettier girls. The middle-aged ones assessed her like livestock and found her wanting. The older ones occasionally showed interest before discovering that a former schoolteacher with no family and no dowry was somehow less appealing than a younger woman with the same lack of prospects. Today appeared to be following the pattern exactly. The youngest man, sandy-haired and nervous, made directly for Sarah. An older gentleman with kind eyes approached Emily. One by one, the flowers were plucked from the arrangement, chosen for gardens that would nurture them. Evelyn stood perfectly still, her face arranged in what she hoped looked like pleasant interest rather than the crushing familiarity of rejection. Not eager enough to seem desperate, not distant enough to seem unwilling, just present enough to suggest she was still in the running, when everyone could see she wasn't. Within 20 minutes, 6 couples had formed. 6 conversations bloomed around her.
Tentative question.
Careful answers. The particular music of people trying to determine if they could build a life together. Evelyn stood near the station wall, accepting a glass of lemonade from Martha Thomas, whose expression had shifted from patient optimism to something that looked like pity. "Miss Hartwell," Martha said quietly, "perhaps we should discuss alternative arrangements. There's a family in town, the Morgans, who've been looking for a governess. It might provide stability while I what?" The words came out harder than intended. Evelyn softened her tone, but not her meaning. "While I accept that no one will choose me. While I trade the hope of a home for the charity of teaching other women's children." Martha Thomas had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I only meant—" A horse's hooves struck the platform with the sound of thunder. Everyone turned. A rider was approaching at full gallop, dust rising in a cloud behind him. He wasn't slowing. The conversations stopped mid-sentence. Lemonade glasses paused halfway to lips as a massive bay stallion charged directly toward the gathered crowd. At the last possible moment, the rider pulled up. The horse reared slightly, muscles bunching, then settled with a snort that spoke of barely controlled power. The man who dismounted moved like someone who'd been born doing it, fluid, certain, unbothered by the dramatic entrance. Evelyn had never seen him before, but she knew who he was. Everyone in 3 territories knew about Nathaniel Calloway. He owned the largest ranch in the valley. 5,000 acres of prime grazing land that his grandfather had claimed and his father had built into something resembling an empire. He employed 30 men, supplied beef to 5 towns, and wielded the kind of quiet power that came from being essential to everyone's survival. His wife had died 4 years ago, or that's what people said. Evelyn had heard whispers during her first week in town. Young bride, tragic loss, devoted widower who'd never looked at another woman since. And he was walking straight toward the gathered group. "Mr. Calloway?" Martha Thomas rushed forward, fluttering. "We didn't expect. That is, you didn't respond to the invitation, and we assumed—" "Got held up." His voice was deep, roughened by years of shouting over wind and distance. Fence break in the north pasture took longer to fix than expected. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark shirt and leather vest that had seen honest work. His face was weathered in a way that suggested 40 years at minimum. Strong-featured, with eyes that reflected the color of storm clouds. Gray threaded through his dark hair. His gaze swept over the group, lingering on each couple for perhaps 2 seconds. Then his eyes found Evelyn. She didn't straighten, didn't adjust her expression. She'd learned not to perform for men who were already looking past her. But he didn't look past her. His eyes held hers for longer than 2 seconds. Long enough that Evelyn felt something uncomfortable shift in her chest. Long enough that Martha Thomas noticed. And her practiced smile took on an edge of confusion. Then he moved, walking forward with purpose. His boots striking the platform in a rhythm that sounded like decision. He walked past Sarah and her banker's son, past Emily and the gentleman with kind eyes, past Catherine, Margaret, and Anne. 6 flowers in full bloom, each more suitable than the last. He stopped directly in front of Evelyn. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the silver in his dark hair. The way his jaw was set in something that looked like determination. He smelled like leather and sage and horses, like the territory itself. Miss Hartwell. Her name in his mouth sounded different, solid, real, like he'd made a decision about what it meant. Mr. Calloway. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I understand you're a teacher. I taught in Boston for 8 years before the school closed, before the position was given to someone younger, before she'd been too old and too unwanted to find another posting. Before you came west, he finished, looking for something different. Evelyn lifted her chin. She'd perfected the art of gracious defeat, but she hadn't forgotten pride. Before I came west because there was nothing left back east. Let's not dress it up in romantic notions, Mr. Calloway. We're both too old for that. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or respect. Fair enough. He glanced at the crowd watching them. Every conversation had stopped. Every eye was fixed on this impossible scene. I'm not good at pretty speeches, and I don't have patience for games. So I'll speak plain. He turned back to her, his voice dropping lower, meant only for Evelyn. I didn't come here looking for a wife. I came looking for a teacher. Someone who's failed before and knows how to stand back up. Someone who won't break the first time things get hard. His storm cloud eyes held hers steadily. I have a son, 8 years old, and he needs someone like you. Evelyn's heart was doing something strange in her chest. Why are you telling me this? Because I looked at every woman here, and you're the only one who didn't smile at me like I was a prize to be won. His voice dropped even lower. You're the only one who looked like you'd survive if I rode away. That's the woman I need. The world narrowed to the space between them. Evelyn could hear her own heartbeat, could feel 6 years of rejection warring with 1 moment of impossible possibility. You don't know anything about me. I know you've been rejected enough times to stop pretending it doesn't hurt, but you came here anyway. That's courage. He tilted his head slightly. I know you're looking at me like I might be cruel instead of kind, which means you've learned to protect yourself. And I know teaching matters to you more than comfort, or you wouldn't be standing on your 7th platform. Evelyn's throat felt tight. Those aren't qualifications for marriage, Mr. Calloway. No, he agreed, but they're qualifications for what I actually need. A teacher who won't give up on a difficult student. Someone strong enough to face what others would run from. What exactly are you proposing? 1 week, he said. Come to my ranch. Meet my son. Understand what the work actually means. If after a week we both think this could work, then we'll talk about marriage. If not, I'll pay for your lodging in town until you decide where to go next. Evelyn looked past him at the gathered crowd. Sarah's face showed shock. Martha Thomas looked like she'd swallowed something sour. The men who'd chosen the other women wore expressions ranging from confusion to slight offense. How dare the wealthy widower choose the least desirable woman? But Nathaniel Calloway was looking at her like she was someone who deserved to be chosen. Like she was someone worth the choosing. 1 week, she heard herself say, to see your ranch and meet your son. Nothing promised beyond that. Agreed. He offered his arm with the same directness he'd brought to everything else. Shall we? Evelyn set down her lemonade glass, picked up her carpet bag, and placed her hand on the arm of the most powerful rancher in 3 territories. They walked off the platform together, leaving whispers and shock in their wake. The main street of Copper Ridge stretched before them like a question waiting to be answered. Late afternoon sun painted the false front buildings in shades of honey and amber, and the mountains beyond stood purple against a sky that was just beginning to think about sunset. Nathaniel guided her toward a wagon waiting at the edge of town. Not the dramatic entrance of the stallion, but something practical, built for hauling supplies and navigating rough roads. He helped her up to the seat without ceremony, then climbed beside her and took the reins. They drove in silence for perhaps 5 minutes. Evelyn had learned that silence said more than most people's words, so she waited. You're not going to ask, Nathaniel finally said. It wasn't quite a question. Ask what? Why I chose you. Why I walked past 6 younger, prettier women to stop in front of a schoolteacher with worn cuffs and careful hands. Evelyn felt something sharp move through her chest. Are we speaking plainly, Mr. Calloway? Or are we pretending this is a normal courtship where I'm supposed to simper and pretend not to notice what everyone saw? We're speaking plainly. His voice held something that might have been approval. I told you I don't have patience for games. Then I'll answer your question. I'm not asking because I assume you had your reasons, and you'll share them if you want me to know. I've learned that demanding explanations rarely gets you the truth. They reached the edge of town where the street gave way to open country. The road wound north toward distant mountains, following a creek that ran silver in the afternoon light. I'm 40 years old, Nathaniel said finally. Been widowed 4 years. My wife was 19 when I married her. He paused, and Evelyn heard everything he wasn't saying in that pause. She died, he continued, his voice rough. That's what people say. Young bride, tragic loss, the devoted widower. Another pause, longer this time. But that's not the truth. Evelyn turned to look at him fully. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. His hands gripped the reins with tension that spoke of words he'd never said aloud. The truth is, Lily didn't die. She left, walked away when our son was 6 months old. Ran off with a traveling merchant who promised her a better life than what she had with me. The words fell like stones into water, creating ripples that spread and spread. The town doesn't know, Nathaniel continued. I told everyone she died in childbirth. Complications, quick burial, private grief. It was easier than admitting my wife chose to abandon her own child. Evelyn's heart clenched. And your son? Daniel was too young to remember her leaving, but 2 years ago, when he was 6, a woman came through town. She looked like Lily, sounded like her. Daniel saw her from a distance, and something in him recognized her, or thought he did. Nathaniel's voice grew even rougher. He ran after her, calling Mama. The woman turned around, confused, told him he had the wrong person, but Daniel was convinced. He begged me to explain why his mama didn't know him, why she pretended he was a stranger. The wagon creaked over a rough patch in the road. Nathaniel guided the horses around it with practiced ease. I told him the truth that day, that his mama had left when he was a baby, that she chose to go, that it wasn't his fault, but sometimes people leave anyway. What did he do? He stopped talking. Nathaniel's jaw clenched. Hasn't spoken a single word since that day. 2 years of silence. The doctor says there's nothing physically wrong with him. It's his mind, his heart, protecting itself the only way it knows how. Evelyn absorbed this. An 8-year-old boy who'd learned that words could hurt worse than silence. That speaking up only brought pain. Why are you telling me this? Because if you agree to this arrangement, you're not just agreeing to teach reading and arithmetic. Nathaniel turned to look at her fully for the first time since they'd left town. You're agreeing to help a boy find his voice again, to show him that not everyone leaves, that failure isn't forever. His storm cloud eyes held hers steadily. I chose you, Miss Hartwell, because you've failed 6 times and you're still standing. Because you know what it's like to be rejected and survive it. Because I think you might be the only person who can teach my son that lesson. Evelyn's throat felt impossibly tight. That's not a romantic reason to choose someone, Mr. Calloway. No, he agreed, but it's an honest one, and I figure you've had enough of people lying to you with pretty words. The truth of it hit Evelyn like a physical force. He wasn't offering her rescue or romance. He was offering her purpose, a chance to use everything she'd learned from 8 years of teaching and 6 years of rejection. A chance to matter again. Tell me about Daniel, she said quietly. Nathaniel's expression softened almost imperceptibly. He's smart. Too smart for his own good sometimes. He draws constantly. Pictures of everything he sees. Animals, buildings, people. That's how he communicates now. Through pictures instead of words. What does he draw most? Birds. Nathaniel's voice carried something that might have been sorrow. Always birds. Flying away. Evelyn understood immediately. A boy drawing what he couldn't have. Freedom. The ability to leave before being left. I should tell you something, Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to break through. About why I'm here. Why this is my 7th attempt. You don't have to. I do. If we're speaking plainly, she smoothed her worn skirt, finding courage in the familiar gesture. I was a schoolteacher in Boston for 8 years, but I didn't just teach privileged children in fancy schools. For the last 3 years, I worked at the Boston Women's Reform Society, teaching reading and arithmetic to women who'd been imprisoned. Women the world had given up on. Nathaniel stayed quiet, listening. One of my students, Evelyn, continued. Her name was Catherine. She'd been arrested for theft. But the real story was that she'd run away from her husband, a man who beat her regularly. She stole money for train fare to escape. The memory rose sharp and clear. Catherine's bruised face, her desperate eyes. Catherine was supposed to serve 6 months, then return to her husband, as the law required. But I couldn't. Evelyn's voice caught. I couldn't send her back to him, so I helped her escape. Found her passage on a merchant ship heading to California. Gave her what little money I had saved. Someone found out, Nathaniel said. Not a question. The school's benefactors discovered what I'd done. They fired me immediately, threatened criminal charges. The only reason I'm not in prison myself is because Catherine's husband decided he'd rather remarry than deal with the scandal of a runaway wife. Evelyn looked at Nathaniel directly. So when you say you need someone who's failed, Mr. Calloway, understand that I didn't just fail at finding a husband. I failed at following rules that told me to send an abused woman back to her abuser. I failed at staying quiet when speaking up cost me everything. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the crumpled letter she'd been carrying since Boston. This arrived 3 weeks ago. I haven't opened it because I'm afraid of what it says. It's from the Reform Society. Could be a summons. Or it could be news about Catherine. Either way, it's part of a past I can't fully escape. Nathaniel studied her face for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. Actually smiled. The first genuine one she'd seen from him. Miss Hartwell, I asked for someone who'd failed and survived. What I got was someone who failed because she was brave enough to do the right thing. His voice carried quiet respect. That's not failure. That's character. The world didn't see it that way. The world was wrong. He gestured to the mountains ahead. Out here, we judge people by different standards. Not by who they used to be, but by what they're willing to become. If you can teach my son that same lesson, that his past doesn't define his future, then you're exactly who we need. The ranch came into view as they crested a hill, nestled in a sheltered valley where a spring-fed creek provided year-round water. The main house was solid and square, with a deep porch. Barn, corrals, smaller outbuildings spreading out in organized sections. Smoke rose from a bunkhouse chimney. Men were working everywhere, their movements efficient and purposeful. But Evelyn's eyes were drawn to a small figure sitting on the porch steps. A boy with dark hair and his father's storm cloud eyes. He was bent over something in his lap, completely absorbed. That's Daniel, Nathaniel said softly. Drawing as always. As the wagon approached, Daniel looked up. His eyes found his father first, then shifted to Evelyn. No smile. No wave. Just careful observation. Measuring her the way she imagined he measured everything now. Waiting to see if she'd prove worth trusting, or just another person who'd eventually leave. Evelyn met his gaze steadily. She didn't smile falsely, didn't perform cheerfulness she didn't feel. She just looked at this silent boy and thought about her sister. The sister she'd lost to illness and poverty and her own inability to save her fast enough. She thought about Catherine, whom she'd helped escape. About all the students she'd taught who needed someone to fight for them when no one else would. And she thought about herself. About 6 rejections and 7 platforms. About the particular courage it took to keep standing up after being knocked down again and again. Nathaniel pulled the wagon to a stop. Daniel stood slowly, clutching his sketchbook to his chest like a shield. Daniel, Nathaniel said, his voice gentle. This is Miss Evelyn Hartwell. She's going to be visiting us for a week. Miss Hartwell is a teacher. Daniel's eyes widened slightly, not with excitement, but with something that looked like wariness. Teachers probably meant change. Change meant risk. Risk meant the possibility of more loss. Evelyn climbed down from the wagon before Nathaniel could help her. She walked toward Daniel slowly, respecting the distance he needed. When she was a few feet away, she stopped, crouched down so they were at eye level. "Hello, Daniel," she said quietly. "I know you don't speak. That's all right. We don't have to talk if you don't want to." She gestured to his sketchbook. "But if you'd like to show me what you're drawing, I'd very much like to see." Daniel hesitated. His grip on the sketchbook tightened. His eyes flicked to his father, seeking permission or reassurance. Nathaniel nodded once. Slowly, carefully, Daniel opened the sketchbook, turned it so Evelyn could see. The page was filled with birds, dozens of them, rendered in careful pencil strokes, each one in flight, each one heading away from something not shown on the page. "These are beautiful," Evelyn said honestly. "You have real talent, Daniel. Have you ever tried drawing birds that are landing? Birds that are coming home instead of leaving?" Daniel stared at her. Something shifted in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition that she understood what he was really drawing. He shook his head. "No. Would you like to try?" Evelyn asked gently. "While I'm here this week, maybe we could draw together sometimes. You could show me how to draw birds as well as you do, and maybe we could draw some that are staying instead of going." Daniel didn't nod, didn't smile, but he didn't close the sketchbook either. He held it open, letting her see his private language, his silent voice. It was, Evelyn realized, an answer, a tentative, fragile yes. She stood slowly, feeling the weight of what she'd just agreed to. Not just a week of seeing a ranch, not just a marriage arrangement with a complicated man, but the responsibility of reaching a child who'd locked himself away, of teaching a boy that silence was safe, but speaking could be worth the risk. "Miss Hartwell," Nathaniel said, "let me show you where you'll be staying." But as Evelyn followed him toward the house, she felt Daniel's eyes on her back, watching, measuring, wondering if the stranger might be different from all the others, wondering if maybe, just maybe, she might be someone who stayed. The guest room was small but clean, with a window that faced east toward the mountains. Evelyn set her carpet bag on the narrow bed and looked around at what would be her home for the next week. A washstand with a chipped basin, a wardrobe that had seen better years, a single chair by the window. It was more than she'd had in 6 months of traveling from platform to platform, staying in boarding houses that charged by the night and looked at her with barely concealed pity. A knock at the door, soft, hesitant. "Come in," Evelyn said. The door opened slowly. Daniel stood in the doorway, his sketchbook still clutched to his chest. He didn't enter, just stood there, watching her with those storm cloud eyes that were so like his father's. Evelyn sat down in the chair by the window, making herself smaller, less threatening. "Would you like to come in?" she asked gently. Daniel hesitated, then took one step inside, then another. He stopped halfway across the room, maintaining careful distance. Evelyn waited. She'd learned patience from years of teaching students who needed time to trust. Finally, Daniel moved closer. He opened his sketchbook to a new page, held it out so she could see. It was blank. "You want to draw something?" Evelyn asked. Daniel nodded. He pulled a pencil from his pocket, sat down on the floor, and began to sketch. Evelyn watched as the image took shape. A woman, dark hair pulled back, worn dress, standing on a platform with a bag at her feet. Other figures in the background, but they were just suggestions. Shadows. The woman was the focus. Daniel looked at her, pointed to the drawing, then pointed at Evelyn. "That's me," she said quietly. "On the platform today." He nodded. Then he drew another figure, tall, broad-shouldered, walking toward the woman while everyone else looked away. His father. "Your papa chose me," Evelyn said, "when he could have chosen anyone else." Daniel studied her face for a long moment. Then he wrote something beneath the drawing, his letters careful and precise despite his age. "Why?" One word. The question he couldn't speak aloud. The question that probably kept him awake at night, wondering why anyone would choose to stay when leaving seemed so much easier. Evelyn took a slow breath. She could lie, could tell him something simple and comfortable. that his father thought she was pretty or kind or suitable. But Daniel deserved truth. Children always did. Because I've been left behind 6 times, Evelyn said quietly. Because I know what it feels like when no one chooses you, when everyone looks past you like you're invisible. Daniel's pencil stilled. His eyes locked on hers. Your papa thinks that because I've survived being left behind, maybe I can teach you something important. She leaned forward slightly. That being left doesn't mean you're not worth keeping. It just means those people didn't understand your value. Daniel's hand moved across the page again. Another word. Mama left. Yes, Evelyn said simply. She did. My fault? The question broke something in Evelyn's chest. This 8-year-old boy, carrying guilt that should never have been his to carry. No, her voice was firm. Daniel, look at me. He did. When someone leaves, it's not because of you. It's because of them. Because of what they need or can't handle or are too afraid to face. Your mama leaving had nothing to do with whether you were good enough. Do you understand? Daniel's eyes filled with tears he wouldn't let fall. He shook his head slightly, not disagreeing but not believing either. Evelyn knew that look. She'd worn it herself every time a potential husband had chosen someone younger, prettier, more suitable. Every time the world had told her she wasn't enough. I had a sister, Evelyn said quietly. Her name was Clara. She was 12 years old when she died. I was 22 and I'd just started teaching. I promised her I'd save enough money for her medicine. Promised I'd make everything all right. Daniel watched her, listening with the intensity only silent children possess. But I wasn't fast enough. The money came too late. Clara died. And for years I believed it was my fault. That if I'd been better, smarter, faster, I could have saved her. Evelyn's throat tightened with old grief. But here's what I've learned, Daniel. Sometimes people leave or they die, or they can't stay, and it has nothing to do with how hard we try to keep them. Nothing to do with our worth. Sometimes terrible things just happen, and we have to find a way to keep living anyway. She met his eyes directly. Your mama leaving wasn't your fault. My sister dying wasn't my fault. And we can't spend our whole lives silent and invisible, trying to avoid getting hurt again. Daniel stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned to a new page in his sketchbook and began drawing again. This time it was a bird, but not in flight. This bird was perched on a branch, its wings folded, still, present, staying. He showed it to Evelyn. She smiled, actually smiled, for the first time since arriving in Copper Ridge. That's beautiful, Daniel. May I keep it? He carefully tore the page from his sketchbook and handed it to her. It felt like a gift, like trust, offered tentatively but genuinely. Thank you, Evelyn said. I'll treasure this. Daniel stood, gathering his sketchbook. He moved toward the door, then paused, turned back. He held up one finger. 1. Evelyn understood. 1 week. Yes, I'll be here for 1 week, and then we'll see what happens next. He nodded once, then disappeared into the hallway, leaving Evelyn alone with a drawing of a bird that had chosen to stay. That first evening, Evelyn met the ranch properly. Nathaniel introduced her to Samuel Chan, his foreman, a man perhaps 55 years old, with weathered skin and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. He'd come west from San Francisco 20 years ago, worked his way from ranch hand to foreman through sheer competence. Mrs. Hartwell, Samuel said, his accent still carrying traces of Cantonese beneath the English. Welcome. If you need anything, you ask. We take care of our own here. It's Miss Hartwell, Evelyn corrected gently. At least for now. For now. Samuel's expression suggested he understood more than she'd said aloud. But Nathaniel doesn't bring women home unless he's serious. You're already more than a guest, whether you know it yet or not. Dinner was simple but substantial. Beef stew, fresh bread, strong coffee. Nathaniel, Evelyn, and Daniel ate in the main house while the ranch hands took their meal in the bunkhouse. The silence should have been awkward, but somehow it wasn't. Daniel drew between bites. Nathaniel read a ranching journal. Evelyn simply observed, learning the rhythms of this household. After dinner, Daniel disappeared upstairs. Nathaniel led Evelyn to his study, a room lined with ledgers and maps and the accumulated paperwork of running 5,000 acres. "I need to explain something," Nathaniel said, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey without asking if she wanted one. "About what I'm actually proposing here." Evelyn accepted the glass. "I thought you'd already explained. You need a teacher for Daniel." "I need more than that." Nathaniel took a long drink. "Miss Hartwell, Evelyn, I need someone who can make this house feel less empty. Not just for Daniel, for both of us." He set down his glass, leaning against the desk. "I've been alone for 4 years. Well, not alone. I have Daniel, but we're alone together, if that makes sense. 2 people in the same house, neither of us talking about what hurts. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand what you'd be agreeing to. This isn't just about teaching reading and arithmetic. It's about building something from broken pieces, about creating a family from people who've all been damaged in different ways." Evelyn sipped her whiskey. It burned going down, but the warmth that followed was almost comforting. "You said this week was about seeing if we're suited," she said carefully. "What exactly are you measuring? Whether Daniel responds to you, whether you can handle the isolation and the work, whether we can stand to be in the same room without driving each other mad." He smiled slightly. "And whether you want this enough to stay when it gets hard. Because it will get hard, Evelyn. I'm not afraid of hard work. I know. But there's work, and then there's the particular loneliness of frontier life. Especially for women. There's a reason so many mail-order marriages fail in the first year." Evelyn thought about Ruth Morgan, the neighbor woman Nathaniel had mentioned. Tomorrow she'd meet Ruth. Hear the truth about what life here actually meant. "Tell me about the school," Evelyn said, changing the subject. "You mentioned building one for the Valley children." Nathaniel's expression shifted, became more animated. "There are maybe 25 children in this valley, ranging from 6 to 15. Most can't read. None can figure beyond basic arithmetic. They're growing up capable of working, but not of improving themselves." He moved to a map on the wall, pointing to a spot northeast of the ranch house. "I own a section of land here, high enough to avoid flooding, close enough for children to walk. I've been thinking about this for 2 years now, since the Morgan boy showed up asking if I could help him read a letter from his grandmother." "You really mean to build it?" "I really mean to build it, and I need someone to run it. Someone who knows teaching, who values education, who won't give up on difficult students." He turned to face her fully. "That's you, Evelyn. That's what I saw on that platform today. Not a desperate woman looking for rescue. A teacher who's been forced to stop teaching and would fight for the chance to do it again." Evelyn felt something unfold in her chest. Hope, dangerous and fragile. "If I agreed to this," she said carefully, "if we married and I started this school, it would be mine to run. My curriculum, my methods, my decisions." "Yes." "And what if parents disagree with how I teach? What if they think I'm too strict or too modern? Then they can teach their children themselves or accept your expertise. You're not an employee, Evelyn. You'd be my partner in this. Equal say, equal authority. Partnership." He kept using that word. Not romance, not submission. Partnership. "I need to think," Evelyn said finally. "Take your time. You have 6 more days." She finished her whiskey and stood to leave. At the study door, she paused. "Nathaniel, why did you really lie about Lily's death? It couldn't have been just to avoid scandal." He was quiet for a long moment. "Because I didn't want Daniel to grow up knowing his mother chose to leave him. I thought it would be easier if he believed she had no choice. That death took her, not her own will. But he found out anyway." "Yes, and maybe that's the real lesson here. We can't protect people from truth. We can only help them survive it." His voice roughened. "I failed Daniel by lying. Don't expect me to fail him again by pretending this arrangement is something it's not. You'll always know exactly where you stand with me, Evelyn. That's the one thing I can promise." Evelyn nodded and went upstairs, her mind spinning with everything she'd learned, everything she was considering. In her room, She found another drawing slipped under her door. This one showed 3 figures. A tall man, a woman with dark hair, a small boy between them, all 3 standing together, facing forward. At the bottom in Daniel's careful letters, maybe, the most hopeful word an 8-year-old silent boy could offer. The next morning, Evelyn woke before dawn to the sound of men moving below, boots on floorboards, low voices, the creak of the front door opening and closing. She dressed quickly and went downstairs to find Nathaniel in the kitchen, making coffee. "You're up early," he said. "Old habit. Teachers rise with the sun." She accepted the cup he offered. "Where are your men going?" "North pasture. We're moving cattle to winter range. It'll take most of the day." He studied her face. "I thought you might want to visit Ruth Morgan today. She lives about 8 miles east. Samuel can drive you." "Ruth is the neighbor you mentioned? The one who'll tell me the truth about frontier life?" "Yes. She's been here 10 years. 3 children. Seen everything this valley can throw at a woman. If anyone can help you decide whether you're suited for this life, it's Ruth." An hour later, Evelyn found herself in a wagon beside Samuel Chun, traveling a rutted road that wound through grassland and pine. Samuel drove in comfortable silence for the first few miles. Then he spoke, his voice measured and thoughtful. "Mr. Calloway is good man, fair, honest, but he is also wounded man. You understand?" "I understand. His wife Lily, she was beautiful girl, young, soft, not made for this life." Samuel kept his eyes on the road. "She cried every day, complained about loneliness, about work, about everything that makes frontier life what it is. Made everyone miserable, including herself." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you are not young girl who thinks marriage is fairy tale. You are woman who knows hardship. That is good. That is what Mr. Calloway needs. What Daniel needs." He glanced at her. "But you should know what you are replacing. A ghost of unhappiness that still haunts that house." Evelyn absorbed this. "Daniel showed me drawings last night. He's starting to trust me, I think. Daniel is good boy, smart, but hurt deep inside. He needs someone patient. Someone who won't leave when things get difficult." Samuel's voice softened. "My own son was like Daniel once. After my wife died, he stopped speaking for 6 months. Only drew pictures like Daniel does now." "What helped him speak again?" "Time, patience, and someone who didn't push, but also didn't give up. Someone who showed him that silence was safe, but speaking could be safe too." He smiled slightly. "You have that quality, Miss Hartwell. I see it in how you move, how you wait instead of filling every silence with noise. Daniel will respond to that." The Morgan homestead came into view, smaller than Nathaniel's ranch, but well-maintained. Sheep dotted the hillsides. A woman emerged from the house as they approached, wiping her hands on her apron. Ruth Morgan was perhaps 33, tall and spare with strong features and eyes that had seen too much to be easily fooled. Her dress was patched but clean. Her hands bore the calluses of hard work. "Miss Hartwell," Ruth said, shaking Evelyn's hand with a grip that spoke of strength. "Nathaniel sent word you'd be visiting. Come inside. Samuel, coffee's hot if you want it." The Morgan kitchen was warm and cluttered with the evidence of children. Drawings on the walls, books stacked on a shelf, a half-finished puzzle on the table. Ruth poured coffee and sat across from Evelyn, studying her with undisguised assessment. "Nathaniel told me to speak plainly with you," Ruth said, "to tell you the truth about what it means to be a woman out here. So I will." She took a long drink of coffee. "It's harder than you imagine, lonelier than you expect, and more rewarding than anyone who hasn't done it could understand." "Tell me the hard parts first," Evelyn said. Ruth smiled grimly. "The isolation is real. In winter, you might go weeks without seeing anyone except your husband, and he'll be gone dawn to dark managing stock. You'll talk to yourself just to hear a voice. You'll count the days until someone visits." She leaned forward. "The work never stops. Garden, chickens, cooking, cleaning, mending, preserving food for winter. Your hands will crack and bleed. Your back will ache. You'll fall into bed exhausted and wake up to do it again. And nobody will thank you, because it's just expected. What about the rewards? The rewards are harder to name but deeper to feel. Ruth's voice softened. It's knowing you're building something that matters. It's watching your garden feed your family through winter. It's teaching your children to read because no school will. It's standing beside your husband during a crisis and knowing your partner's in survival. She paused. But here's what I really need you to understand, Evelyn. Choosing Nathaniel means choosing a man who's already loved and lost, who's already failed at marriage once. He won't love you the way young men love, recklessly, passionately, without reservation. He'll be careful, guarded, protecting what's left of his heart. Can you live with that? Ruth asked bluntly. Can you build a life with a man who might never give you all of himself? Who might always hold back, afraid of being hurt again? Evelyn thought about this question, about Nathaniel's careful distance, his clinical assessment of what he needed versus what he wanted. My heart is guarded too, Evelyn said quietly. 6 rejections taught me to protect myself, to stop hoping for fairy tale romance and start looking for something more sustainable. She met Ruth's eyes. Maybe 2 guarded people can build something stronger than 2 people who give everything away too quickly. Maybe partnership matters more than passion. Ruth studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You might survive this after all. Not thrive, that's too strong a word for what life out here offers. But survive with dignity and purpose. Sometimes that's enough. They sat in silence for a moment, 2 women who understood that survival was its own form of victory. There's one more thing, Ruth said. About Daniel. Yes. He's not just a silent boy who needs a teacher. He's a test. Nathaniel will watch how you handle Daniel, and that will tell him everything he needs to know about whether you can stay when things get difficult. Ruth's voice turned serious. Because Daniel will test you, Evelyn. He'll push you away and pull you close. He'll make you care about him and then try to prove you'll leave like everyone else. That's what traumatized children do. They test until they're absolutely certain you won't abandon them. Can you pass that test? Ruth asked. Can you stay even when an 8-year-old boy is doing everything in his power to make you leave? Evelyn thought about her sister Clara, about the students she'd taught at the Reform Society, about Catherine, who she'd helped escape. Yes, she said simply. I can stay. Ruth smiled. Then you have a chance. A real one. That evening, Evelyn returned to the ranch to find Daniel waiting on the porch steps, sketchbook in his lap. He stood as she approached, holding out the book. Inside was a new drawing, a woman kneeling beside a boy, both of them looking at a blank page together, pencils in hand, creating something new. Underneath, Daniel had written, "Tomorrow? Yes," Evelyn said, her heart clenching with unexpected emotion. "Tomorrow we'll draw together, and every day after that if you'd like." Daniel nodded. Then he did something extraordinary. He smiled, just a small one barely there, but real. Evelyn felt tears threaten and pushed them back. This boy was teaching her something she'd forgotten. That trust, once broken, could be rebuilt. That silence could be broken with patience. That choosing to stay mattered more than any grand declaration. That night, Nathaniel found her in the parlor after Daniel had gone to bed. "Ruth spoke with you?" he asked. "She did. She was honest. And I haven't run away yet." Evelyn met his eyes. "But I need to know something. You said you need a partner. Someone to help with Daniel and the school and building a life here. But what about other things?" She felt her face heat. "I mean, if we marry, would this be a real marriage? Or an arrangement?" Nathaniel sat down across from her, his expression serious. "I won't lie and say I don't want companionship, Evelyn, physical and otherwise. But I also won't demand anything you're not willing to give freely." His voice dropped lower. "If we marry, it would start as an arrangement. Partnership first. Respect and honesty and shared purpose. If something more develops, affection, desire, whatever you want to call it, then we'll face that when it comes. But I won't expect you to perform feelings you don't have. Is that clear?" "Very clear." Evelyn felt relief wash through her. That's actually perfect. Good. He stood. You have 4 more days to decide. Use them however you need. But Evelyn was beginning to realize she'd already decided. Not because Nathaniel was wealthy, or because this was her last chance, but because of a silent 8-year-old boy who drew birds and needed someone to teach him that staying was possible. Because of a school that could be built, giving Valley children the education they deserved. Because partnership sounded better than romance. Because truth sounded better than pretty lies. Because for the first time in 6 years, someone was offering her purpose instead of rescue. And maybe that was worth more than all the fairy tale endings she'd stopped believing in anyway. The next 3 days passed in a rhythm that felt almost natural. Mornings, Evelyn helped in the kitchen, learning the requirements of feeding ranch hands, the quantities of food needed, the timing, the particular balance between hearty and simple. Afternoons, she spent with Daniel. They drew together, sitting by the creek or on the porch. He showed her how to shade properly, how to capture the curve of a wing or the texture of bark. She showed him letters, incorporating them into his drawings. A is for aspen, B is for bird, C is for creek. He didn't speak, but he communicated. Through his drawings, he told her stories. About his father, always working but always kind. About Samuel Chun, who'd taught him to braid rope. About his mother, rendered in shadows and absence rather than direct depiction. Evenings, Evelyn sat with Nathaniel in his study. They talked about the school, about curriculum and supplies and how to structure mixed-age learning. They talked about the ranch, about challenges and possibilities. They talked about nothing in particular, finding comfort in shared silence. On the 4th day, Nathaniel took her to the site where the school would be built. It was a gentle rise northeast of the ranch house, high enough to avoid spring flooding, protected from north wind by a ridge. Good sun exposure, beautiful view of the valley. Here, Nathaniel said simply. 1 room to start. Room for expansion later if needed. I already have lumber ordered. We could start construction in spring, finish by summer. Evelyn turned slowly, seeing not what was but what could be. A schoolhouse with windows on both sides for light. Desks sized for children ranging from small to nearly grown. A wood stove for winter. A porch for warm weather lessons. Space for children to learn that education was possibility. That reading and writing and arithmetic could open doors their parents had never imagined. How many children? She asked. 25, maybe 30 by the time we're ready to open. The Morgan children, the Henderson kids, families from every ranch in the valley. Children who are growing up capable but not educated. He moved to stand beside her. You'd be doing more than teaching, Evelyn. You'd be giving these children a future. That matters. It does matter. Her voice was thick with emotion. More than you know. That evening, as they sat at dinner, the 3 of them in their careful silence, Evelyn made her decision. She pulled the crumpled letter from her pocket. The one from Boston. The one she'd been too afraid to open. I need to know what this says, she told Nathaniel, before I give you my answer. He nodded. Do you want privacy? No. I want witnesses, in case it's bad news. Her hands shook slightly as she broke the seal, unfolded the paper. Read words that would determine whether she could move forward or had to return to face her past. Dear Miss Hartwell, I am writing on behalf of Catherine Morrison, formerly Catherine Hayes. You knew her as a student at the Boston Women's Reform Society. Catherine wishes you to know that she is safe and well in San Francisco. She has found employment as a seamstress and has begun divorce proceedings against her former husband. Thanks to your courage in helping her escape, she has built a new life free from violence. Catherine also wishes you to know that she has spoken with a lawyer regarding the charges that were threatened against you. The lawyer has determined that no criminal case exists. Your former employers made threats they could not legally follow through on. You are free, Miss Hartwell. Free from legal jeopardy. Free from the past. Free to build whatever future you choose. With gratitude on Catherine's behalf, Margaret Ellsworth, Esq. Evelyn read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Free. She was free. Daniel reached across the table and touched her hand gently, questioning, concerned. I'm all right, Evelyn managed to say. These are happy tears, Daniel. I just learned that something I was afraid of isn't real, that I'm not in trouble, that I'm free to stay here if I choose. She looked at Nathaniel through her tears. If the offer still stands, I'd like to accept. I'd like to marry you and teach Daniel and help build that school. I'd like to try partnership and see if it becomes something more. Nathaniel's face transformed. Not quite a smile, but something close. Relief and hope and careful gladness. The offer stands, he said quietly. It'll always stand, for as long as you want it. Daniel pulled his sketchbook toward him and began drawing furiously. When he finished, he showed them the image. 3 figures again. Man, woman, boy. But this time, they weren't just standing together. They were holding hands. A family, tentative but forming. Fragile but real. At the bottom, Daniel had written just one word. Home. They were married on a Saturday in early October, when the aspen leaves had turned gold and the air carried the first hints of coming winter. The ceremony took place in Copper Ridge's small church, with perhaps 20 witnesses. Ruth Morgan stood as Evelyn's attendant. Samuel Chin as Nathaniel's best man. Daniel sat in the front row, sketchbook on his lap, drawing the proceedings with careful attention. Reverend Thomas read the traditional words with extra emphasis on, "Till death do you part," as if warning them of the permanence they were choosing. Evelyn spoke her vows clearly, meeting Nathaniel's eyes, promising partnership and honor and respect. He did the same, his voice steady, his hands warm when he took hers. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Nathaniel kissed her briefly, formally. A seal on a contract rather than an expression of passion. Then they were walking down the aisle together, Evelyn's hand on his arm, facing Copper Ridge as Mr. and Mrs. Calloway. Outside, Samuel had brought the wagon, loaded with Evelyn's meager possessions. Nathaniel helped her up to the seat, then climbed beside her. "Ready?" he asked. Evelyn looked at Copper Ridge, the town where she'd arrived hopeless and desperate, where she'd stood on her 7th platform facing her final rejection, where everything had changed because one man had walked past every flower to choose her. "I'm ready." They drove toward the ranch, toward home. Daniel sat between them on the bench, his small body a bridge connecting them. Behind them, Copper Ridge whispered and speculated. Ahead, the valley waited with all its promise and challenge. Evelyn was Mrs. Nathaniel Calloway now, partner to a wounded rancher, future teacher to valley children, mother, in practice if not in blood, to a silent 8-year-old boy who needed someone to show him that staying was possible. She was terrified and determined in equal measure. And for the first time in 6 years, she was chosen. The first weeks of marriage passed in careful adjustment. Evelyn moved her few possessions into Nathaniel's bedroom, their bedroom now. The wardrobe had space for her 3 dresses. The bed was large enough that they could sleep without touching, maintaining careful distance while growing accustomed to shared space. Nathaniel was respectful to the point of formality. He changed clothes in his study, knocked before entering their bedroom, asked permission before anything that might be considered intimate. They were strangers learning to be partners, and both understood that trust took time. But slowly, incrementally, the distance between them narrowed. One night, 3 weeks after the wedding, Evelyn woke to find Nathaniel thrashing in his sleep. Caught in some nightmare he couldn't escape, she touched his shoulder gently. "Nathaniel, wake up." He jolted awake, disoriented, breathing hard. His eyes found hers in the darkness. "Sorry," he muttered. "Did I wake you? What were you dreaming about?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he answered. "Lily, the day she left, I came home from checking fence and found her note. Daniel crying in his crib. The house empty except for us." His voice roughened. "I dream about it sometimes. About arriving too late to stop her. About failing to see the signs." Evelyn sat up, pulling the quilt around her shoulders. "It wasn't your fault, Nathaniel. Just like it wasn't Daniel's fault. She made her choice. I know that in my head, but knowing and believing are different things." Evelyn reached for his hand in the darkness, found it, held it. "I understand," she said quietly. "I still dream about my sister sometimes. About arriving at her bedside with the medicine money, only to find I'm too late, that I've failed her again. They sat in silence, two people holding hands in the dark, united by guilt they couldn't quite release and losses they couldn't quite accept. "Thank you for telling me," Nathaniel said finally. "Thank you for letting me in." Something shifted that night, not dramatically but noticeably. They were still partners, still careful. But the walls between them had developed cracks, small openings through which trust could flow. Winter arrived in late November with the first real snowfall. Evelyn had prepared as best she could, following Ruth's advice. The root cellar was stocked. Firewood was stacked high. Chickens were secured in their weatherproof coop. Everything that could be preserved had been, but nothing truly prepared her for the isolation Ruth had warned about. The ranch hands stayed in the bunkhouse, venturing out only for essential work. Nathaniel spent long hours in the barn, tending stock, checking for problems. Evelyn was alone in the house from dawn to dusk, with only Daniel for company. And Daniel, while affectionate, was still silent. Evelyn found herself talking to the chickens, narrating her actions as she cooked and cleaned, singing hymns just to hear a human voice, even if it was only her own. Some days the loneliness pressed against her like physical weight, but she'd survived worse kinds of loneliness. The loneliness of being invisible while surrounded by people. The loneliness of being unwanted in a world full of potential suitors. This isolation was honest, at least, clean, not laced with rejection and judgment. Daniel became her anchor. They established routines, morning lessons in reading and arithmetic, using his drawings as teaching tools. Afternoon art sessions, where Evelyn learned to see the world through his eyes. Evening stories by the fire, where she read aloud and he illustrated the tales in his sketchbook. He still didn't speak, but he communicated more richly every day. His drawings grew more complex, more nuanced. He began incorporating words into his art, labeling things, adding captions, telling stories through combined image and text. One afternoon in early December, as they sat drawing by the window, Daniel created something extraordinary. It was a comic strip of sorts, multiple panels showing a story. Panel 1, a woman standing alone on a platform, surrounded by shadows. Panel 2, a man walking toward her while others looked away. Panel 3, the man and woman standing together, facing a small boy. Panel 4, the three of them together in a house, snow falling outside. Panel 5, the woman kneeling beside the boy, both of them smiling. At the bottom, Daniel had written, "How I got a MOM." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "Daniel." He looked up at her, his storm cloud eyes serious. He pointed to her, then to his chest over his heart. Then he made a gesture she'd seen before, the sign for home, in the simple hand language they'd been developing together. "You are my home," the gesture said. "You are my mother now." Evelyn pulled him into a hug. This silent boy who taught her that words weren't the only way to say, "I love you." "You're my son," she whispered against his hair. "Not because I gave birth to you, but because you chose me. And I'll never leave you, Daniel. Never. That's a promise." He hugged her back, fiercely, desperately. The kind of hug that said he wanted to believe her but was still afraid to trust completely. That evening, Evelyn showed the drawing to Nathaniel in their bedroom. "He called me his mother?" she said, her voice thick with emotion. Nathaniel studied the drawing, his expression unreadable. "How do you feel about that?" "Honored, terrified, responsible." She looked at him directly. "I love him, Nathaniel. I didn't expect to, not this quickly. But I do. He's my son now, in every way that matters." Something shifted in Nathaniel's face. The careful control he usually maintained cracked, revealing vulnerability beneath. "I love you," he said suddenly. Raw, unplanned. "I didn't mean to. I thought we'd stay partners, respectful and distant. But somewhere between you arriving and now, I fell in love with you. With how you handle Daniel. With how you face loneliness without complaint. With your strength and your honesty and your—" Evelyn kissed him, cut off his words with her mouth on his, surprising herself as much as him. When they pulled apart, both breathing harder, Nathaniel stared at her. "I love you too," Evelyn said simply. "I fought it. Told myself this was partnership, not romance. But you're wrong about one thing. I do complain. Just not to you. I complain to the chickens constantly. He laughed. Actually laughed, the sound rich and genuine. The chickens are excellent confidants? He agreed. Then he kissed her again, and this time neither of them pulled away quickly. That night, their marriage stopped being an arrangement and became something real. Winter deepened through December and January. Snow piled high. Temperatures dropped to brutal levels. The ranch became an island, cut off from Copper Ridge by impassable roads. But inside the house, warmth grew. Nathaniel taught Evelyn about ranching, about reading weather and understanding animal behavior, about the economics of beef and the politics of water rights. Evelyn taught Nathaniel about literature and history, about worlds beyond Montana territory, about ideas that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with beauty. Daniel thrived. He'd gained weight. His drawings showed less anxiety, more joy. The birds he drew were no longer always in flight. Many now perched contentedly on branches, wings folded, staying. But he still didn't speak. Evelyn didn't push. Speech would come when Daniel was ready, or it wouldn't. Either way, he was communicating, learning, growing. That was enough. One bitter February night, a storm hit with unusual violence. Wind shrieked around the house. Snow fell so thick you couldn't see the barn from the porch. Evelyn woke to find Nathaniel already dressed. "I have to check the stock," he said, pulling on his heavy coat. "Animals can't survive this without help. It's too dangerous. They'll die if I don't go. Samuel and the men are already out. I'll be careful." He kissed her forehead and disappeared into the storm. Evelyn waited by the window, watching for his lantern in the whiteout, praying he'd return safely. 2 hours passed. 3. The storm showed no signs of letting up. Daniel appeared at her elbow, his sketchbook clutched to his chest. His eyes were wide with fear. "Your papa will be fine," Evelyn said, trying to convince herself as much as him. "He's done this 100 times. He knows what he's doing." Daniel shook his head frantically. He opened his sketchbook and drew rapidly. A man lying in snow. A lantern tipped over beside him. Darkness all around. Evelyn's heart clenched. "You think he's in trouble?" Daniel nodded desperately. He pointed to the drawing, then to the door, then to her. "You want me to go look for him?" Evelyn's mind raced. It was insane. She didn't know the ranch, didn't know how to navigate in a blizzard. But if Nathaniel was hurt, she made a decision. "Daniel, listen to me. I'm going to try to find your papa. But I need you to do something very important. Stay by the fire. Keep it fed. If I'm not back in 2 hours, you go to the bunkhouse and get Samuel. Can you do that?" Daniel nodded, his face pale but determined. Evelyn bundled herself in Nathaniel's spare coat, wrapped a scarf around her face, and stepped into the storm. The cold hit like a physical blow. Wind tore at her clothes. Snow blinded her instantly. She could barely see 3 feet ahead. But she had to try. She knew Nathaniel had gone toward the barn. From there, to the near pasture where cattle would cluster for shelter. She followed what she hoped was the right direction. One hand on the rope line Samuel had strung between buildings for exactly this purpose. Her hands went numb. Her face burned with cold. Fear clawed at her throat. Then she saw it. A dim glow in the snow. A lantern still burning, lying on its side. And beside it, Nathaniel, on his knees, struggling to stand. Blood on his forehead where he'd clearly slipped and hit his head. "Nathaniel!" She reached him, got an arm around him. "Can you stand?" He looked at her, dazed. "Evelyn? You shouldn't, the storm." "I know. Daniel sent me. Now get up. We're going home." Together, they fought their way back along the rope line. Nathaniel leaning heavily on her. Evelyn's muscles screaming with effort. The storm trying to tear them apart. They burst through the front door into warmth and light. Daniel was there immediately, throwing himself at Nathaniel with the force of his relief. Samuel arrived minutes later, checking on them. He helped Evelyn get Nathaniel to the bedroom, cleaned the head wound, pronounced it superficial but requiring rest. When Samuel left, Evelyn collapsed into a chair, shaking with exhaustion and delayed fear. You saved my life? Nathaniel said quietly from the bed. Daniel saved your life. He knew somehow. Drew a picture of you in the snow. Sent me after you. Where is he? Downstairs, probably drawing the whole rescue. Evelyn managed a weak smile. He was so brave, Nathaniel. So strong. Like his mother. Evelyn looked at him. I'm not his mother by blood. You're his mother in every way that matters. You risked your life in a blizzard because he asked you to save me. That's what mothers do. They fell asleep together, exhausted, grateful to be alive. Downstairs, Daniel sat by the fire, drawing the day's events. Panel by panel, he chronicled the storm, the rescue, the return home. At the bottom of the final page, he wrote words he'd never written before. My family, my own, my dad, my home. And then, in smaller letters beneath, I love you. Words he still couldn't say aloud, but words that existed now, documented, real. Spring arrived slowly, then all at once. Snow melted, creeks swelled, grass greened, the valley exploded with life and color and possibility. And construction began on the school. Nathaniel, Samuel, and 10 ranch hands worked on it during spare hours. Lumber was cut and hauled. Foundation was laid. Walls rose against the sky. Evelyn designed the interior, where desks would go, how to arrange space for mixed-age learning, where supplies would be stored. Daniel helped, carrying nails and tools, drawing plans and diagrams. He'd become part of the construction crew, a boy learning the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. By late April, the school stood complete. One room with windows on both sides, a wood stove, a teacher's desk, 15 student desks of varying sizes, built by Nathaniel himself. Bookshelves waited for the texts Evelyn had ordered from Denver. A blackboard hung perfectly level. The stove had been tested and approved. Everything smelled of fresh paint and sawdust and possibility. Evelyn stood in the doorway, overwhelmed by the reality of it. Her school, built by her husband, waiting for valley children who needed education the way plants needed water. It's beautiful, she whispered. Nathaniel came to stand beside her, Daniel on his other side. You're opening in 2 weeks, Nathaniel said. Ruth has spread word to every ranch in the valley. You'll have maybe 25 students that first day. Are you ready? No, Evelyn admitted, but I'll never be fully ready. Sometimes you just have to begin. Daniel tugged on her sleeve. He held up his sketchbook. Inside was a drawing of the school, but not empty. In his imagining, it was filled with children at desks, their faces eager and attentive. At the front stood a woman, Evelyn, gesturing toward the blackboard, teaching, building futures. At the bottom, MRS, Callaway's school, where anyone can learn. That's perfect, Daniel, Evelyn said, her throat tight. That's exactly what the school will be. The first day of school arrived on a May morning so beautiful it seemed like a blessing. Families began arriving at 8 o'clock. The Morgan children with Ruth. The Henderson kids with their parents. Children from ranches Evelyn had never visited. Brought by parents who'd heard about the teacher who'd come west to give valley children a chance. By 9 o'clock, 23 students sat at the desks, ranging from 6-year-old Emma Parker to 15-year-old Thomas Grant. Some had never held a pencil. Some could barely write their names. All looked at Evelyn with a mixture of nervousness and hope. Daniel sat at a desk in the back corner. Nathaniel had asked if he wanted to attend. Daniel had nodded yes immediately. He wanted to be part of this. Wanted to learn alongside other children. Wanted to belong. Evelyn stood before her students, looked at their expectant faces, and felt everything she'd learned in 8 years of teaching in Boston come flooding back. This was what she'd been born to do. Good morning, she said clearly. My name is Mrs. Callaway, and this is our school. Some of you have never been to school before. Some of you can't read or write yet. That's fine. That's why we're here, to learn together. She paused, making eye contact with each student. But I need you to understand something important. Education is not something I give you. It's something you earn through hard work and attention and determination. I can teach you, but you have to do the learning. Are we clear? 23 heads nodded. Good. Then let's begin. She started with basics, teaching the youngest children to hold pencils properly, moving to alphabet recitation for beginners while advanced students practiced writing their names. She created groups by ability rather than age, understanding that some children learned faster than others. That comparison was the enemy of education. By midday, Emma Parker had written her first letter. A wobbly but recognizable E. Thomas Grant had worked through basic multiplication with fierce concentration, and Daniel, in the back corner, had been following every lesson. His pencil moved constantly, taking notes, illustrating concepts, engaging with material as if starved for it. At lunch, children scattered outside to eat food brought from home. Evelyn sat on the porch steps, exhausted but satisfied. Daniel approached with his lunch, sat beside her. He opened his sketchbook to show her what he'd been drawing all morning. It was a detailed comic strip showing the day's lessons. Panel by panel, he'd captured each child's achievement. Emma's first letter, Thomas's concentration, the younger children learning to count, the older ones tackling harder material. At the bottom, in careful letters, everyone can learn. Amorous. Calloway teaches everyone. That's beautiful, Daniel, Evelyn said. You really captured today. He smiled at her. That small smile she'd first seen months ago. Then he turned to a fresh page and began drawing the afternoon lessons he anticipated. Evelyn watched him. This silent boy who'd been her first student, who'd taught her that communication took many forms, that love didn't require words, that family was built through choice and commitment rather than blood. That evening, after the last student left and the school stood empty again, Nathaniel arrived on horseback. How was it? He asked, dismounting. Perfect, terribly, wonderfully, exhaustingly perfect. Evelyn laughed, the sound carrying relief and joy. They're so eager, Nathaniel, so hungry to learn. I'd forgotten what that feels like, teaching students who actually want education. You're happy? Yes. For the first time in years, I'm genuinely happy. Not just surviving or adjusting, actually happy. Nathaniel pulled her close, there on the porch of the school they'd built together. You deserve this, Evelyn. You've earned it. They stood together as the sun lowered toward the mountains, watching shadows lengthen across the valley. Behind them, Daniel emerged from the school with his sketchbook. He'd been drawing the empty classroom, capturing its potential, its possibility. He joined his parents on the porch and they stood together. Three people who'd been broken in different ways, but who'd found each other and built something whole from the pieces. A family, not born but chosen. Summer passed in the rhythm of teaching and ranching. Evelyn's students progressed with remarkable speed. By autumn, even the youngest could read simple sentences. The oldest were tackling literature that would challenge many city students. Word spread. More families wanted to enroll their children. Evelyn had to establish a waiting list for the following year. Nathaniel expanded the ranch, buying adjacent land, increasing the herd. The profits were good. The future looked secure. And Daniel? One October afternoon, nearly a year after Evelyn had first arrived in Copper Ridge, something extraordinary happened. Daniel had been working on a drawing all week. Secret. Private. He wouldn't show anyone, not even Evelyn. Finally, on a Saturday, he gathered Nathaniel and Evelyn in the parlor. His expression was nervous but determined. He held up the drawing. It showed their family's journey. Multiple panels chronicling everything. The platform where Nathaniel had chosen Evelyn. The first drawings by the creek. The wedding. The blizzard rescue. The school opening. Moment after moment of their life together. At the bottom, Daniel had written a title for his comic. How I Got My Voice Back. Evelyn's breath caught. Daniel. He looked at them both, took a deep breath, and spoke. Thank you. His voice was rusty from disuse, barely above a whisper, but real. After 2.5 years of silence, Daniel Calloway had found his voice again. Thank you for staying. He continued, words coming slowly but steadily. Thank you for not leaving. Thank you for being my family. Tears streamed down Evelyn's face. Nathaniel's jaw was clenched with emotion he was trying not to show. Thank you for teaching me, Daniel said to Evelyn. For being my mom. He turned to Nathaniel. Thank you for choosing her. For for bringing her home, for giving us a family. Then louder, stronger, I love you, both of you. I love our family. Evelyn pulled him into a fierce hug. Nathaniel wrapped his arms around both of them. They stood together, this family that had been formed from rejection and loss and careful choosing. We love you too, Evelyn whispered. So much, Daniel. So very much. I know, Daniel said, his voice growing more confident with each word. I can feel it, every single day. I needed to say it out loud, to use my voice to tell you. That night, after Daniel had gone to bed, still talking, excited to use words again, Nathaniel and Evelyn sat in their bedroom. You did that, Nathaniel said quietly. You gave him back his voice. No, he found it himself. I just showed him it was safe to use it. Still, none of this would have happened without you. He took her hand. I chose you on that platform because I thought you could help Daniel. But you've done so much more than that. You've made this house a home. You've built a school that's changing the valley. You've given me back my faith that love is possible. Evelyn leaned against him. You gave me purpose when I'd lost it. You gave me a family when I'd stopped believing I'd ever have one. You chose me when the world said I was worthless. The world was wrong. Yes, it was. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd chosen partnership over passion and discovered that partnership could become the deepest kind of love. 5 years passed. The school expanded. Evelyn hired 2 assistant teachers to handle the growing enrollment. Valley children who'd learned to read were now teaching their younger siblings. A culture of education had taken root. Daniel, now 13, had become Evelyn's unofficial teaching assistant. He helped younger students with art and drawing, used his own story of selective mutism to encourage children struggling with their own challenges. He spoke freely now, though he still preferred drawing when words felt inadequate. His art had become extraordinary, good enough that a gallery in Denver had expressed interest in showing his work. Nathaniel's ranch continued to prosper, but more importantly, he'd become a different man, less guarded, more present, capable of showing emotion without fear that vulnerability meant weakness. And Evelyn? One spring morning, she stood on the porch of their home, watching Daniel help Nathaniel with morning chores. She touched her stomach gently, feeling the life growing there, their child, a baby that had taken 4 years to conceive, but who was now definitely, undeniably real. She hadn't told them yet, wanted to wait until she was certain, but watching her husband and son together, she felt overwhelming gratitude for the life she'd built. 7 years ago, she'd stood on a platform in Copper Ridge, believing she'd reached the end, that her 7th attempt would be her last failure. She'd been wrong. That 7th platform had been the beginning, the moment when rejection became redemption, when being overlooked became the greatest blessing. Because Nathaniel Calloway had walked past every young, pretty option to choose the woman no one else wanted, had seen value the world had missed, had offered partnership instead of rescue, and together they'd built something extraordinary. A family, a school, a life that mattered. Nathaniel emerged from the barn, saw her standing on the porch and smiled. That full, genuine smile he'd learned to give freely. You look happy, he called. I am happy, Evelyn called back. Come here. I have something to tell you. As he walked toward her, Daniel following behind, Evelyn thought about the letter she'd carried from Boston, the one that had offered her freedom. She'd been right to stay, right to choose this life, this family, this purpose. Sometimes the thing you're running from is exactly what you need to run toward. Sometimes the person who chooses you last is the only person who truly sees you. And sometimes being unwanted by the world is the greatest gift because it means when someone finally wants you, they want you for exactly who you are. Evelyn had been rejected 6 times, but she'd been chosen once, by the right person at the right moment for the right reasons. And that one choice had been enough to build a life worth living. Thank you for staying until the end of Evelyn and Daniel's story. If their journey touched your heart, I'd be so grateful if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories about resilience, second chances, and unconventional families. Comment below with where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel and connecting with viewers around the world. Remember, Being chosen last doesn't mean being chosen less. Sometimes it just means being chosen right. Until next time, keep believing in second chances. Keep believing in yourself. And keep believing that your story, however many rejections it includes, isn't over yet. The best chapter might be just one choice away. Thank you for being here.